Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matthew Wright, a consultant here at Improving, and it is my pleasure today to introduce Claudio. He began his IT journey at the young age of 14, inspired by a generous mentor whose spirit of guidance has fueled his remarkable 30-plus year career. Here at Improving, Claudio passionately supports developers through thoughtful coaching and practical agile methodologies. On a more personal note, Claudio has been a true fountain of wisdom for me. He is incredibly thoughtful, creative, patient, and an intentional listener. Some of my favorite moments happen during our spontaneous break room chats, where he generously shares not just his insights, but also the thoughtful journeys behind them. Outside of the professional sphere, you're likely to find him riding his motorcycle or shredding on his guitar. Please join me warmly in welcoming Claudio.
Oh, that's awesome. Thanks, Matthew. That's much appreciated. Hello, everybody. This is so exciting. I've been working on this talk for a couple of months now, putting my thoughts together once I know that I was going to be giving this talk to you. So thank you very much for taking some time out of your busy day to join us in this talk today. And if you're watching this video later, thank you very much as well. I hope you get something out of this. You're seeing a QR code here where I'm going to be asking you for some feedback towards the end of the talk, as well as I'll be offering you some extra content because I always, as it's always the case, when I prepare for a talk, I prepare way more material than I have time for. So afterwards, whatever I couldn't like fit into this talk, I'm going to be sending out extra content if you go to that link and you just, you say, yeah, I would like to receive more content about this topic. So leveling up, preparing senior developers for lead roles with AI. Like Matthew said, coding is not something that I do in my spare time. I do keep life very interesting, doing all sorts of activities that end up feeding back into my professional career as well. And it will actually come up later in this content. But I've been doing this for a long time now. So I've seen different cycles and patterns that have surfaced around, the different tools that we use as developers, and then leading teams. Like the first team that I've led was in 2004 or five, if memory serves me right. Before that, I was just a solo person running my own thing. But once I started working with, development teams, I've learned some skills that have been very useful for me. And so I'm often asked, like, how do you take that extra step to go from, say, a senior developer into a leadership type of role? And nowadays, the age of AI, can we use and leverage those tools to at least practice or evolve, develop those skills to get into some sort of leadership role? About improving, if you haven't heard of us, we are like all over the map and increasing our presence in different spots. I'm originally from Brazil, and as you can see, we are also moving down into South America as well, which is kind of cool for me to see that representation. We have many different kinds of service offerings, and I wanted to include this slide because the very first one, community, it's this, right? This is part of what we do as a company. We get together as a company to put together content to offer, people in the industry, and hopefully that's going to help out somehow. And we have several areas of expertise. If you look us up on our website, you can find the different things that we do as an IT consulting company. So make sure to check it out. And then up to this talk, by now, you've probably heard this from whichever source or whatever. AI won't take your job, someone using AI will. Probably heard that before. So hopefully what I'm going to be showing you is how you can use and leverage AI to make yourself better. That's the whole thing. It's not like, is it going to replace what I do? It's like, no, I'm using it to help me do what I do better and hopefully help others also do what they do better. Right, and creating this virtuous cycle. So why this talk? Why have I put together? There is this gap between senior developers and lead type of roles. It's very often the case that somebody is in a software development team and that person may just become the leader because nobody else would want to do it, or maybe because that's the person that's the most senior within that team, or whatever the case might be. Now that person has become a leader. And like, okay, what do I do now that I've been appointed the leader? In other cases, there's somebody in the team that's already presenting, like showing, demonstrating leadership behavior, and it's just a natural fit. But the person maybe does that naturally without really thinking, oh, I'm actually leading people here. How do I actually do this properly? And there are the other situation, or there is the other situation when somebody may be in a team would like to become a sort of lead, but does not know what to do, how to get there, how to develop those skills. This is what this talk is all about. And oftentimes, what happens is, if you don't have a team to work on and develop those skills specifically as a lead, then how do you do that? Right? It's very hard. Well, we can use AI to simulate that kind of situation and practice those skills and muscles. And that's what I would like to share with you today. There are, as far as software development is concerned, two paths to leadership, right? Technical or team lead. So you can be a technical lead or a team lead. Hey, Claudio, isn't that the same thing? No, it's not. The technical lead is more focused on the technical concerns. Do we have the proper architecture? Are we using the proper cloud service for this project? Are we using the right frameworks, libraries, tech stack, what have you, right? Is the code of high quality? Are we using proper patterns and practices, right? As far as the technological solution is concerned. That is what the technical lead will do, like set those standards, those expectations, and lead the team from that front. A team lead, on the other side, is the person who's going to be working with the team, with the people, very likely with the stakeholders, and making sure that we are all understanding why we are doing whatever it is that we're doing, why does it matter, and making sure that everybody's on the same page with that. So those are two paths. Now, you can walk both paths, right? You may have like the center lane where you keep going back and forth. That's actually where I fit in, where I do some of the technical stuff, I do some of the working with people stuff, bringing it all together, right? And then I lean on to like, there are things that I'm not um, technically deep enough to make certain decisions. I rely on my team. That's me playing the team lead part of leveraging the highly technical person's skills to make sure that we are all aiming in the same direction and being as productive and effective as we can. Know your strengths, right? It's not, they're not mutually exclusive, right? As I said, you can be both, or you can lean more towards one or the other, but it's important to be aware of both because it's the aggregate of both that will make for great solutions. So know what your strengths are, identify your gaps, because as I said, I sit kind of like in between that thing, and I need to know what am I the strongest at or the weakest at, and how I can I work with my teams to, potentialize all of our efforts and things that we values that we bring to the table. So with that said, let's focus first on the practicing technical leadership as I have just defined. So as a technical lead, you have to make sure that what the team is doing, it's the expectations are clear and everything is reproducible. You create a solution here, you can reproduce a similar solution here, and so on. AI can help you simulate some of that by acting as, say, a junior developer working with you. As you put together your framework to practice those skills or that role, you have to be practicing clarifying technical expectations, giving precise instructions, really good instructions, and ensuring standards and consistency. So, and I'll give you examples of what I mean by those, but it's very important. Even if you're like heavily technical and all you can do is speak whatever programming language of choice you have, C Sharp, Java, JavaScript, TypeScript, you have to be able to communicate in plain English with people, right? Because if you're going to be the technical lead, you're leading other people technically towards a solution. So you have to be able to articulate expectations, instructions, standards concisely, precisely for people to be able to follow you if you are the lead. So it's a very important skill to practice. So the way I'm going to be showing this, like how can we practice that on AI or using AI tools? Uh, Ahead of time, I prepared, like I recorded the parts of the demo so that we can uh, uh, expedite certain things. We don't have to wait on me like stumbling through typing as I'm talking, as well as waiting on the models to process everything so we can like stay on track, on course for the points that I'm trying to make. So let me switch over to this part of the presentation where what I have here is I'm using JetBrains Writer as my IDE. In this project, I have a docs folder where I'm putting documentation of expectation, instructions, and standards. A very simplistic scenario. Let's pretend that I started this because I want to onboard a development team or a new member of this team to this project. Well, how do I get that person up and running? Well, let me start writing out what are the expectations. So I put down, well, every feature must have automated tests. If you don't know how to write them, ask. I'm here to help. We write unit, integration, API, end-to-end tests. Which ones depend on how valuable the feature is. Those are expectations that I set as a team lead. If you don't know how to write tests, come ask me. If you know which tests to write, what types of tests to write, come ask me. Oh, how do I know whether a feature is valuable or not? If you don't know that, come talk to me, right? So making those things clear that those are expectations. Instructions could be something like this. We use CQRS, command query responsibility segregation. If a feature looks like CRUD, create, retrieve, update, delete, bring it up. We may need to ask better questions to the stakeholders because every application is like, oh, that's just CRUD until it isn't, until complexity kicks in and people say, can we add a flag to do this? Can we add another thing? If we're building like a CRUD type of thing, stop and bring it up. It's like, is that really what is going to solve the problem here? So I make that as part of the instructions. And then so everything is either a command or a query. And then maybe some examples. Commands are always based on user intent, not on CRUD intent. So a bad command, update sales order as shipped. That is CRUD. You retrieve a record from a table, you update some Boolean field, and then you save it. That's CRUD. It's not the user's intent. What the user's intent is, in this case, good, ship sales order. That's what they're trying to do. Ship the sales order. That's the business operation. Queries provide answers to the user instead of providing data. The user is not asking for data, they are asking for answers. We need to understand what are the questions and what are the answers that they're looking for. Bad, query sales orders, too broad. That would be like select star from sales orders. No. Good, shipped sales orders. That's the question that the users are trying to answer because, oh, we have shipped those orders. That's what I'm looking for because I have the customer on the phone asking me about it. So from instructions, we move over to maybe standards that we have when we implement the features. For example, backend code. Follow standards, the C# conventions, unless instructed otherwise in the bullet points below. For example, do not use the private modifier. That's a preference of mine. Private is the default modifier in C#. I don't want to even see that in the code. It distracts me from the other things that are actually important. And then I put down like some notes as if I'm thinking about, well, maybe I need to write something about my preferences towards using the for each command or using the for each method, or how I name variables in expressions instead of using X, which is the common. I use underscore in certain situations. So maybe I want to document that. Tests, I specifically say use snake case. So querying underscore shipped underscore sales orders and so on. Use casing for emphasis, like querying shipped sales orders. Those are my preferences when we write any kind of automated test. And you don't have to like get stuck on why do you want you don't want the private keyword, or why do you want tests written that way? What I'm saying is, as a lead, a technical lead, you should make those very clear and make sure to not only state the instructions like the standards, but also back it up with why, right? So in this, I haven't actually explained why. So if I present this to a new developer, I would hope them to ask me, why is it that you want that? And then I want to explain, because once they understand why I follow these practices, if something is not included in the instructions, the developers might come back and say, well, shouldn't we do this thing here? Because you said this is why you have those other practices. Like, yes, thank you very much. Or, oh, actually, I have considered that. I have not documented that, but thanks for asking, right? It brings up those that kind of conversation. So as I have those in my projects, then I can open, and this was my experience using the agentic mode in Writer, because I've been a cursor user as far as the IDE for the AI generation. For this one, I thought, let me experiment with a different tool, because it's like if a different team member joins my project, I need to understand their background. I need to understand how they work. And that's why I said, okay, I'm going to be using this different type of agent. It's a different type of person, virtual person that I'm working with. So I'm hiring this person, I'm onboarding that person on my team, and I'm giving this instruction. Hey, implement a backend FizzBuzz, the typical FizzBuzz task. Sorry, let me pull back there. Implement a backend FizzBuzz feature. Make sure to follow our process as described here. And then I give a link to that folder that has those instructions. So this is analogous to, there's a person who just joined the team. Maybe you print out some instructions or some documentation. Maybe you give them access to a folder somewhere to go read and stuff. And then you have a new task that you're giving them, and you say, implement this task based on these instructions, on these documents. So this is what the agent is doing. I'll help you implement that feature for a project. First, let me check. So it's good because you can see what it's trying to do. As it's doing that, listen. In this case, it's read. Because based on what it says that, oh, I will do this, I will do that, you may already find ways to optimize that. Because if it says something like, oh, I will create, like here, I'll create both the feature implementation and tests according to the CQRS pattern mentioned in the instructions. As I see that, I could say, oh, stop. Don't do both tests. Maybe write the test first. Let me review, and then you implement the thing next. By seeing what it's doing, how it's thinking, or how it's interpreting your instructions, you can already collaborate and improve that. Same thing with a person, right? You tell somebody, hey, here's your assignment, put some process in place where you say, okay, do this one thing here, see what you find out, and then come tell me before you go too far into that task. Let's review it. Make sure that you're not going completely off track. That's going to just make things harder for you to then come around. Same kind of experience in the collaboration with AI. As it creates the implementation here, right? So it's saying, hey, I'm creating those tests, I'm creating this thing and that thing. Something I often do is I look at the code it generated, and then I go through that code and I'll make some changes like this one. Oh, hey, there's a lot of unused directives in the file. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to remove those. I'm going to change the namespace to file scope namespace. So this is me applying like my technical preferences to the project and making some refactorings, as you see, as I go through the code, like, oh, I found this if else if block, which I'm not too fond of. I want to change that into switch statements, right? And that's what I did there, right? And then here I'm using a primary constructor, And then here I'm changing this field into a read-only field, another primary constructor. Right here, I'm using the target type to new up the object, right? Just like making the code a little bit like cleaner, more concise. So I go through and I make the changes, right? It's one of the processes that I follow. Then, as if I had been working with a person, like sitting by their side or sharing screens, after I've made the changes, this is what I usually prompt AI with. I've made some changes, mostly related to coding style. Analyze them and update instructions in the docs development process file. And let it go. So you remember them in the future. Ask me any qualifying questions you might have to create great instructions. So think about this. Instead of looking at the code generated and saying, you are doing it all wrong. Oh my God, what were you thinking? Because sometimes that's what we do, right? Bad. No, you go in, you have different approaches. This was one approach. It's like, okay, hold on, good job. Let me go, do some refining here and we're gonna talk about it. So I made the changes, and now instead of saying, here, I made changes, just learn and do that next time. No, I'm saying I made certain changes. Here's the focus, just the style. That's what I focused on this time. Analyze them and update your instructions there. So instead of me updating the instructions with using my words, I'm telling my assistant, see what I did, see what you understand from what I did, right? Update the instructions with your words and ask me if you have any questions, as if I was working with a person here, right? So it's doing the thing, right? Going through, I'll help analyze the changes and update the document. I noticed several C# coding style changes, and then it goes out and it finds out what documents to implement the changes, standards, code style. It actually created a code style. Now, this is what it's cool. Remember I said it wrote instructions, use a language that fits it, the AI agent, the way it created the document, code style guidelines, C# file structure, use file scope namespaces, this, that, and the other, a little C# block with an example, right? Further down, what is the preferred way to do instead of something else? It's, again, instead of you writing the instructions in the way that you understand, you let the person or the agent write instructions in the way that that it will understand. And then you can review it and say, yes, this is right, this is right. Oh no, this is not quite right. Let's adjust that, make that refinement as part of the process. So it caught on a lot of the things that I changed there. Keep on going. Keep an eye on the time here. Yeah, that's another file. We can speed up through that. Cool. So I review that as the human. I did my part of the work. I go in and I say, oh, that is all great. I noticed you favored arrange act assert for the tests. Are you familiar with given when then format? If so, write instructions on how you would write tests following that format. So again, instead of saying, hey, I want you to rewrite everything in given when then, I say, I noticed you did arrange act assert. Are you familiar with this other one? If you are, update instructions to use that instead. And let's see how it does it. So it says, yes, I am familiar with the given when then format, which is key part of behavior-driven development. That's it. It's a great alternative to arrange act assert. So it does some, it's like, this is why it's important, focus on business behavior. So it's going through the instructions to update them accordingly. Now you see in the comments, it's changing from AAA, arrange act assert, to given when then, GWT, and so on, right? It explains all of that. It explains, how you set up context and so on. Now, something I caught on, I saw the instructions and I saw that this is how it thought of doing it. Like, oh yeah, we write given when then. So it's like instead of writing arrange act assert, you put a comment that says given when then. Good, but not exactly what I had in mind, but it's good. It's like, okay, I see where you're going with that. We're going to be working on that in just a little bit, right? So I said, that's good, but let's make it better. For GWT tests, we have some preferences. Analyze the following blog posts and update instructions accordingly. So here, as a technical lead, something that I do is I write blog posts that I can share publicly and I can share with team members so that in the future, here's it, right? I'm telling my team member here, hey, I have some blog posts where I explain my preferences and why I have those preferences. It's in those blog posts. So check those out and then update your instructions based on what you've learned. So I point out how to write the given when thens, how I think of given as past, when as present, then as future. So I explain those things and I say, okay, do that. And I also say, also, we do not use comments in simple, in code for simple, obvious things. Analyze this post for more guidance and update instruction, because I have a whole separate blog post where I talk about commenting code, my preferences and why I have those preferences and what to do. Like instead of creating code comment to say, hey, is inconclusive, is duplicate address, is whatever, rename the method so that you can remove the method or function so that you can remove unnecessary code comments. So I point out to that and I say, okay, run with it. And let's see what it has come up with. It says that it's reading my blog post and updating the documentation, right? And now notice like the language that it uses there, given, past, yada, 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 when, present. So it read my blog posts and it updated the instructions with the way it understood that. It's my chance to come in, refine that, review it, and see if that's how I wanted to do it. Once it's done that, the don't comment part, or the do comment, don't comment, so it caught onto that, provided examples there, right? It wrote examples there. Then the other thing, I said, I do already have some tests in this project that are shaped exactly the way that I want them. So I went ahead and I copied a link to that project. In Cursor, I've been used to just be able to drag and drop from the folder, the Explorer, to the agent, the chat. In Writer, it's not an option. That's why I'm copying a link or the path to that file. And here, let me get this thing out of the way, right? Those instructions are still a little bit off. Look at tests under this folder for a reference. And then with that, right, it's analyzing. It found my context-based testing approach. It's updating the testing guidelines, the standards, all those documents it found. And now this is better. This is more like what I was hoping to find. Given whatever, when whatever, then whatever, as method names without the comments for that. And then again, if you want to learn why I want that, there are blog posts where I describe that. But it updated the documents. Now I say, great. Now refactor the FizzBuzz tests according to those instructions, right? So the work you had previously done, go ahead and apply it here. And I can see it creating the separate files for that. It summarizes what it did. When I look at the files, like, yep, right on. That's how I expect to see tests in this project. All right, so it did that. If we keep looking through some of the other files, you notice that like here, oh, it didn't add a using statement, so I had to hit a shortcut to add it. This would be something I would say, hey, update instructions so that you don't forget to add those using statements for the should library that we are using here, right? I like that it adds a few comments here and there explaining its assumptions, like, oh yeah, the large range that would exceed reasonable response size, because those make me think about, it's like, do we have requirements around that? Do we need to turn that into a requirement on a user story? So I like that it does it for that reason, right? And it implemented, you can look at this at a later point, but how my preferences technically on how we write tests in this project. So with all that in place, sorry, that was a mouthful, but this is the time I'm gonna pause for questions and ask, hey, Matthew, do we have any questions that have come up about all this stuff I just talked about?
Absolutely. We actually have two, and I'll
Cool.
start with the first. Given that these standards could be used by multiple developers, do you see a AI instructions repo that all developers on the team would reference during development?
Yes, thanks for the question. And this is it. So I've been making this practice of having all these instructions, they get pushed into the project for source control. So when we write and maintain these instructions, they're available to all developers on the team, and then all developers can contribute to that. And I also like, we all know how we developers are pretty bad at keeping documentation.
Yep.
With this is much easier to do so because you can like maybe get it started, like what are the main bullet points of what we want to cover. You may like do the actual work, change the code and whatever, and then tell AI, hey, I've made these changes here, create some instructions based on the changes that I've made to the code, ask me questions because I want to create these as instructions that other developers and AI assistants are going to be using. So from here on, it's much easier to create better documentation and to keep them updated. And what was the next one?
Next question. What's the biggest difference you've experienced between giving instructions to AI and giving them to a junior developer?
Oh, that's awesome. The main difference is that they hallucinate differently. Like the the AI answers instantly and incorrectly, and the junior thinks about it and then gets it wrong. That's the main difference. All joking aside, the main difference for me is that I feed off people's body language. So when I'm working with people and I give instructions, I get to read their expression and then understand like, is the explanation coming through? Is it resonating? Is it clicking? Or is it not? Because maybe I need to find a different way. I assume it's like it's not that the person cannot take this in. It's just the way that I'm delivering the message is not connecting. So I have to work with the person to make sure that I tailor the message to their perspective. So that is something great working with people. With AI, you don't get that. You don't get like, hey, AI, you should be doing this. Oh, I don't think I know what you mean. Like you cannot read that. So that's a muscle that you cannot practice, right? But part of it, as I said, as you tell AI to do something, read what it's saying. It's like it's way to tell you what it's thinking. So it's a way for you to like bridge a little bit of that gap. With in a human interaction, learn to read people's expressions, body language, so that you know whether your message is landing or not, right? Excellent. Cool. Thanks, Matthew. We are going to keep moving because there's quite a bit of content I want to go over. And whichever questions you guys might have and gals that we don't get to, at the end, you're going to have the little form to reach out to me. That's going to be a way to keep chugging through those questions that you're going to have in the future. So that was technical leadership, team leadership, which is the other kind we mentioned earlier. That kind of leadership is more about making sure that the team, the development team understands why we are doing the work on whatever it is that we are working on. Why are people willing to, reach into their pockets and give you money to do that thing? You need to understand why that is. It's not just, oh, it's because I was told to do so. Like, no, you have to understand why so that you can engage with it at a very different level. One thing is to just be the doer. Oh, I'll just do it because people told me. Another one is like, oh, why do you need that? Okay, all right. I see why you need that. What is your motivation? I'm gonna do my best to give you what you need, not necessarily what you want, but to give what you really need, right? So translating stakeholder needs into stories is extremely important. Listening and clarifying the problem so that you know what you're doing, and helping developers understand why. So here's a simple, good, bad example. People are in the room, stakeholders are saying something, 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 checklist, something, something, something. Developers go like, oh, a checklist, that's what you need? Sure. hold my beer. I'll have that, a checklist feature coming up right out. And then what proceeds is that we have like some relational tables mapped in the database, and then you have some CRUD screen to let people enter checklists, save checklist, edit checklist, delete checklists, because we are very helpful in that manner. That's when we also end up having user stories that are like, as a user, which I have a very big beef with that. In my blog post, you might find why. I want a database to store checklist items so that I can manage them easily. Like that kind of user story, not very useful. So we don't want that. So here's a little project that I'm gonna be showing as an example here. As I mentioned before, as Matthew mentioned before, one of my hobbies is riding motorcycles at a racetrack more specifically. So years ago, I created this Beyond the Track websites to help me and my fellow members of this websites to organize their trip to a track, right? What we call a track day, to have fun over the weekend. So in order to do that, one of the things that we do is we create checklists. Hey, did you get your tire warmers? Did you get your tools, your wrenches? Did you get your spare parts? Did you get this, that, or the other? That's important. That's why we need a checklist. And it's a very specific kind of checklist. It's not just an open-ended checklist. So with that requirement in mind, here's how I'm going to show how I would be coaching somebody into that implementation from a team lead perspective. So going back to the same project, notice that I have a backlog folder with my epics. That's where I'm putting my features, my user stories, the documentation as markdown files. And then I create a new folder called checklists. And then say, I'm putting in here the initial conversation we've had with the stakeholders. In this case, I'm the stakeholder, okay? But I also represent the other stakeholders. Generating user interest. Let's see, let me get to a point where it's we can read independently. He sees it's a good candidate. So they're talking about checklists, why it's important, what they're trying to achieve with that, some ideas about feature enhancements. So I captured part of that conversation, or the most important parts, and I put it in a markdown file. I learned that there are some videos explaining in the legacy system how does that feature work, right? So, that's how you go. You set up groups of items and you create templates. And it's, how can I learn a little bit more about that? Well, those videos are on YouTube. I can use the AI feature on YouTube to ask for a detailed summary of that video, which gave me just that. So I take that information and I add that information to this documentation in the project. So it's part of this collaboration. Stakeholder, so you mentioned these things. Are there other ways I can learn about that? Sure, there are these videos on YouTube that describe what we currently have. You can learn from that. Great, thank you very much. Optimizing our time so that we don't spend the stakeholders' time on things that they've already done in the past. There was another video, I went through the same thing of like, go to this other video, ask for a summary, get that summary in. Nowadays, with a lot of people using AI transcribers in meetings, that's something you can manage, that you can leverage. I've been using that a lot as well. When the client offers access to meeting transcripts, I use that because then I'm going to turn that just the way that I'm doing it in this project. I said, okay, I have some initial information about why we need that feature. I'm going to go into that folder and create a stories markdown file. And here's how I'm interacting with my agent. I'm saying, hey, help me write user stories or stories. See the initial conversation file, initial conversation with stakeholder. The document also includes information about how similar features in their legacy system work. With this information, write stories for us to implement what the stakeholders need, right? But let's see what they're going to be doing. You might ask, hey, isn't that the product owner's responsibility or the business analyst responsibility? Maybe if you have those roles in the project, if those people have the time to give you the user stories, the acceptance criteria that you need, then that's great. In many situations, you don't have that. Maybe the product owner is busy running the business or doing their other things. We, the development team, we can help them with that. That's what we are doing here. We are engaging with AI to say, create those user stories for us. So if you're working with a person, right, a new person on the team, maybe that's that. Hey, we have this conversation with the stakeholders. Can you try writing some user stories for that? Or reading the user stories that we have and seeing if you have any questions, if we understand what it is that we are doing, right? So here we see the AI assistant writing those user stories about the track day checklist. And this is what it has come up with. It identified what is considered the minimal viable products, right? The MVP, the core stories. It wrote a whole bunch of different stories. As a track day participant, I want to something something, so that something something. Here's the acceptance criteria. And it wrote a whole bunch of them, right? We don't need to see all of them. I just need you to see that it wrote 12 user stories based on that output that we created real quick, from like 2 or 3 paragraphs from the initial conversation with the stakeholders to some videos that are available. And then you can get more context from there, streamline that. Here are some user stories. What can we use that for? We can bring it up, say, to the product owners, to the business analysts, to the other, the stakeholders, the business people who we are trying to serve, and say, these are stories we've come up with. Does this reflect or describe the problems you're trying to solve? So I saw how it created the user stories, and I thought, oh, I also have some guidance to give you about how we write user stories and why we follow those guidances. There are blog posts, right? So I have a series of blog posts where I describe that, because when I'm coaching people in those things, I tell people about those things, like, writing cinematic user stories. You'll notice that I start talking about the most user stories are written as a, I want to, so that, and I don't follow that pattern. I follow the in order to, I want, so that pattern. And here I explain specifically why I follow those patterns. That's the most important thing. Start with why. First things first. It's all described in here. How I refine user stories, which is going to be our next step. We got some stories. Stories are not requirements. They're placeholder for conversation so that we can refine them and find something that's really going to describe the problem we're trying to solve, the value that we're trying to bring to the people we are serving. So as I found that, I said, hey, great job. Let's refine the user stories so that they follow our guidance. So I already had some file here talking about, hey, this is how we do story writing. So I point our agents to those instructions. And then I say, analyze content here for a better understanding why. And I pointed it to my blog where it can find that information, right? And then it's doing the thing. I'll refine the user stories to follow the guidance, yada, 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 the gherkin formats, the given when thens, following those blog posts, following the cinematic style for the stories. And notice that as it's working, it's going through each one of those stories, refining those stories, which is what I've been doing for years in a team situation with our stakeholders, with our business analysts, with our development team. Notice it already applied that format where I want to start with the in order to. That's the most important thing of the story. Then you give me the rest. So it caught onto that. And then it created the scenarios and then the given when then scenarios there, described in a way that I describe in my blog posts, where there's no mention to, oh, given a table in the database, given a button, when I click the button, then I see a drop down. There's nothing like that here. There is like plain English, neutral of any technical concerns, because I want to take these stories and have a conversation with our stakeholders to make sure that we are actually describing their problems accurately. So we did that for every single story. And then after that, I picked the first feature story there and I said, the stories look great. Let's implement feature view predefined checklist template, create an implementation plan as a checklist, and document it in an implementation plan file. Analyze the project to make sure you understand how features are implemented both on the front end and the back end. We'll review your plan before implementation starts. So you may hear a lot of people say, "Oh, I'm not trusting AI because I tell it to do things and it comes back all wrong." Here's part of the solution. You don't just tell it to do. You say, "Here are the user stories. You have information about how we do things in this project. Create an implementation plan." It's like asking with the new person that you are onboarding and saying, "Write down your plan. How are you going to be tackling this task that I'm giving you?" So we're doing that with AI here, right? And I'm telling it to create the instructions. So it goes out and it's creating that implementation plan for us, right? And it shows, hey, here's the feature overview. It did a project analysis and then it found out that the backend is written on .NET Core API using CQRS with Wolverine and event sourcing, yada, yada, yada. It says the front end, likely Net.js, Next.js, and the other things it found there. And then the implementation checklist, domain modeling, the database, what are the classes that we're going to be creating, the models we're going to be creating for that, what are the endpoints we're going to be creating for that. And we don't need to go through every single detail. I just want to show you that it shows the back end, the front end, what is the plan? What is it thinking, quote unquote, about doing? What kind of tests to write? What kind of documentation to write? What are the technical considerations? What should those models in the C# side look like? What should the endpoints look like? That gives me the chance as the lead to review that, make corrections, and then say, go. Next, and it also works with typos well, before we move on with that, are there any questions we should ask the stakeholders? Again, instead of just telling AI, do the thing, instead of telling your junior developer, other people on your team, implement this user story, like give them the story and say, look over it. Is there anything we should ask the stakeholders about? You do that with people, you do that with AI. So I gave it that. It says you were right to consider stakeholders' question before proceeding with implementation. And it came back with a whole bunch of good questions, like template content questions. What specific categories group should be included in the predefined template? For example, bike preparation, safety gear, tools. So in the industry, in the problem specific sense, it gave me questions. It's like, oh, those are actually pretty good questions. Let's go ask them. Same thing you should be doing with people. Remember, I'm showing you how to use AI for that, not as a replacement for people. This is how you should be communicating with members of your team. And you can practice that here using AI to get pretty good results. So it talks about like user experience questions, business rule questions, integration questions, a lot of good questions there. So I looked through that. Let's pretend I went out, talked to the stakeholders. Then next I'll say, hey, we're good to go. Do you have any questions for me before you start the implementation? I'm your lead, your team lead, your tech lead. Do you have any questions for me before you put your heads down and you start doing the work? Again, I'm showing you how to use AI for that. We should follow the same process with humans. So it did come back and it asked me some questions. Sorry, I went a little bit too quick here. I wanted to catch on something. Here, technology. Should we implement the front end with Next.js as mentioned in the README file? And I'm like, oh, I forgot we had a README file. Because no, that's not what we are going to be using for this project anymore. So I remember I had a document already describing that. So I say, regarding the front end, see this other document here and update the implementation plan if needed. We'll tackle the other questions later. It went ahead, it read the document I gave it, which I had created at a different point, and then it updated the plan because we are using, like right here, oh, sorry, keep hitting the wrong buttons here. Right, we're not using Next.js, we're using Blazor WebAssembly. So once it found that in this other document, it updated everything. It mentioned the razor type of things. Later, it mentioned the like samples of how it's going to be creating those Blazor templates. So it's my chance to come in, adjust instructions if need be, right? I tell it to update the README file because we don't want to get confused in the future about that problem again. It went ahead and it updated the README file, so it doesn't mention Next.js for this project anymore. Update the implementation plan so that it refers to the user story was something else that I asked it to do. And what I wanted it to do is the following. For each part of that checklist, it actually links to what scenario in the user story are we talking about here so that you can have a map or a roadmap to your story's implementation. And I like how it did it here, right? Where it says for this acceptance criteria, this is the component or these are the components that implement that scenario. And what is the validation method? Oh, we're going to do manual testing and automated testing. We're going to do a visual inspection of the user feedback. It created all of that. I'm like, yeah, we can run with that. So we got that. I said, okay, go ahead. Last but not least, go ahead and design the endpoints needed by this story. And I pointed out to how we do that or examples of endpoint designs. I pointed out to those. It did the work. It created the files in the way that we do it, which is we create markdown files that describe what is the route to that endpoint, what is the purpose, what is the HTTP verb, what are the query parameters. That's all great. What is the design of the JSON that's coming back? Instead of me having to go through and creating that, I said, go ahead and create it based on the user story. I can look it over and I can say, oh, I don't like that name of that field, the data type here, I actually expect something else. You can refine that before you say, go ahead and implement those endpoints. So I did that, review that, and let me, sorry, I'm kind of like rushing a little bit through the end here just to go through that part of like practicing the team lead part of our work as leads. Good point to ask, Matthew, do we have questions here for this section of the presentation?
Yes, we do.
Excellent.
How do you personally balance being technical versus communicative in your current role?
That's a good one. I start with the communication first. I want to understand the why. If I do not understand why we are working on certain things, why certain features matter, there's no code. We're not writing any code. We're not creating any database. We're not doing any cloud magic stuff. We're not doing any of that. So I start with the communication part. I streamline my process and my collaboration for that to understand the why and making sure that people on the team understand the why. Once we got that, then we shift over to the, okay, technically, do we have the standards, the conventions to implement the feature that we're being asked? This is usually how I balance things out.
Nice. We also have another question, and I want to remind you that we have about 3 minutes remaining.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay. How would you suggest the developers to create those ad hoc stories without inspiring a fire and forget, harnessing AI for this responsibility? Is that reliant upon just having those best practice checklists?
That is part of it. Yes, you don't want to let like a AI go nuts doing things. You want to be like, do a little bit, let me check, do a little bit, let me check. So what has been working really well for me is to outline the development process from the conversation all the way to, demonstrating it to the stakeholders, deploying it into production and so on, and identify, okay, what are the spots? Like, what can I use AI or leverage AI to automate some of those steps, and at which steps should I say, okay, you do the thing and you ask me first, or you tell me what you're going to do, I will review, you're going to go and start executing the plan, and I'm going to review at the following checkpoints. That is very important, like working with somebody that you're bringing onto the team. What are the checkpoints? Define those checkpoints, and then encode those as instructions, like as a checklist, so that if you need to create a new chat with the agent, it's not like, oh, now I have to tell you everything. It's like, no, you just point to those documents you've created and you've been keeping track of the instructions, the story, what's being executed already, what findings did we have in between. So yeah, the whole like fire and forget for one big thing, I'm not a big fan of. So that's what's been working out for me. Great question. So let me quickly run. There was another demo. I'm gonna make this available later, which is also leveraging AI to create a script for your sprint review. Hey AI, we've worked on this feature pretty hard. Help me create a sprint review that's gonna highlight the value of what we created, what problems have we solved, and this is what it did for me, right? It mapped out using a language that our stakeholders use. So I know when I'm presenting this to the stakeholder, instead of saying, oh, we created this button, we created this thing, it's like, no, we solved this problem. And AI here had context to help us with that. And to wrap us up, I'm going to skip through some of this. I'm going to make some of this content available later. I want to have a shout out here to opportunities that we have at Improving. Like if you're not familiar with some of these processes, TDD, BDD, user stories, effective user stories, we have a lot of training for that. Our Scrum and Agile training offerings are great for that. I would ask you two things here. One is on the left, please give me some feedback on this talk. Also, if you'd like to receive the slide deck and some more content, some of the stuff that I was not able to share at this tail end, please do that. On the right, it's a shout out to or a call out to next week's Improving Talk, Building AI Products, Expert Insights from Software Engineering, which I hear it's going to be pretty cool because it's going to, among other things, talk about the importance of UX in this kind of AI workflow. So I'm looking forward to that. And with that, I thank you very much, and I turn it back over to you, Matthew.
Well, it's 1 o'clock, at least in our time zone, and that is it for us. Until next time. Thank you, Claudio.
Thank you.